Welcome. And this morning, we're probably going to focus on Torah T'mimah. The reason I say probably is because life has taught me that you really can't be a prophet. So, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah.
Amen. Amen.
So we are going to focus on the Shabbat, as we have. That's probably going to be our topic, at least for the moment, and maybe over the course of the days that we have. And here we are. So we are looking at this part, the very first part, which said, vaYak'hel Moshe et kol adat bnei Israel. Moses gathered together the entire community of the children of Israel, vayomer alayhem, and he said to them, Ela hadvarim asher tziva Hashem la'asot otam. These are the things that the Lord commanded to do them. All right. And as we know, we would have thought it's a surprise. We would have thought he was telling them about the instructions of the tabernacle, which in fact happens right after this passage, essentially. But here we go into the Shabbat. So, Vayomer alayhem v'gomer, and he said to them, etc. Lama ne'emar. Why is it said here? Lafish ne'emar. Why? Because it says Va'asu li mikdash. Make for me a sanctuary. Right back in Parshat T'mimah, where we started this whole thing. And because it says make for me a sanctuary, Shomea ani, I would have thought, I would have inferred, bein b'chol, bein b'shabbat. Whether it's a weekday or the Shabbos, that's what you have to do. God is saying, make me a mikdash, a sanctuary. So I should have to do it every single, you do nothing but that until it gets done. Talmud lomar, for this reason, scripture teaches, vayomer lahem, he said to them, sheshet yamim te'aseh melacha, 6 days work should be done. Bachol, in other words, during the week, v'lo b'Shabbat, and not on Shabbat. So even though they were building a sanctuary, they would take a break, a day off on Shabbat. And I'm going to do the best. When I was preparing, yes, go ahead.
Let me just mention, because we had studied the Heschel Shabbat, which mentioned that Shabbat was a sanctuary of time.
I know, yes.
So this is part of building a sanctuary. It's just not, it's building the sanctuary of time by giving some Shabbat laws.
Right. So that's Heschel's interpretation, and that's fine. It's very poetic and it's lovely. But here we're talking about legal issues. Mm-hmm. And my own sense is this is my take on this. And that is that God was saying, hey, I'm asking you to cease labor to build me a sanctuary. Alachat kama v'chama, a fortiori, you should take off and take this day of ceasing labor on the Sabbath for yourselves, for your own personal needs. And that, in other words, what the subtext of this is just how powerful and important observing the Sabbath is. It's Heschel's poetic sense to call it a sanctuary of time, and he's right. It's Yom Shabbat Kodesh, right? And the word we say, the Shabbat is Kadosh. It is its own sacred space. So, but let's go back into the main sort of thrust of this text. Kavanat hakushia, the point of this question, lama ne'emar kan, why is it stated here? Bichlal inyan Shabbat, in discussing the issue of Shabbat. V'hakvar ne'emar beParshat Tisa, is because it's already mentioned. We already came across it. In this class we didn't, but if you read the entire Parsha of Ki Tisa, the preceding Parsha, you'll see that it does say, that's where you see, V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, etc., etc. It's already stated. Umashni, and so it teaches, Dahava Amena, it taught that I would have thought, de binyan Beit HaMikdash doche Shabbat, and in fact that the construction of the temple would override the Shabbat kamash malan, and that's why it's teaching us there. V'nir'eh delachen hava amena chen, and it appears that for this reason I would have thought this, mishum dahainu omrim, because we would say, kamo shehutru karbanot b'Shabbat, that just as sacrifices are permitted on the Shabbat, and by the way, when you perform a sacrifice, you are violating Shabbat rules, but it was done. Kach hutra melechet hamishkan. Likewise, so the construction of the tabernacle should have been allowed. Dishnehem tzorech gavohahen, because both these matters, both offering up sacrifices and constructing the tabernacle, they are dealing with the needs of what is on high, meaning God, right? Ve'ien mashakatuv b'perek hasamuch, and see what is written in the next verse, Batam hadavar, regarding the reason for lama nishtane be'emet din binyan Beit HaMikdash, why in fact the laws concerning the construction of the temple were different, why they were treated differently, mikorbanot le'inyan zeh, why they were treated differently from the sacrifices regarding this matter of not, in other words, that one overrides the Sabbath, and this construction doesn't override the Sabbath. Okay. Let me go on. Vehine. So now he's sort of developing things, right? Vehine, and in fact, in Yevamot, in the tractate Yevamot, page 6a, Yalif, we learn out the Ein Binyan Beit HaMikdash, that the construction of the temple, Doche Shabbat, does not override the Shabbat, mi dichtiv, from what is written. Interesting. Reish Parshat Kodashim, at the beginning of the Parsha of Kedoshim in Leviticus, it says there, Et Shabtotai Tishmaru u'mikdashi tir'au. You should observe my Sabbaths, and fear, literally it means, respect my sanctuaries. Okay. And that's the reason we don't construct the temple on Shabbat. And it's a whole different derivation. Kulchem chayavim bichodo. You understand from this, all of you are required to honor me. Ye'uyan sham, and he says, check that out. Now that I did not check out, but that's what he's telling us. Because the point is, v'nir'eh, and it appears, the afalpi didrashal shelefanenu yoter mevo'eret le'inyan zeh, and it appears that even though this particular explication, which is before us, the one we're dealing with now, yoter mevo'eret is clearer le'inyan zeh, regarding this matter, that statement in Kedoshim, et shabtotai tishmaru o tishmoru o mikdashi tir'au, is not so clear as to it teaching us that we can't construct the temple on Shabbat, but what we're dealing with here and how we're deriving it out seems pretty clear. It's fairly straightforward. The Ire, and he explains why. Why is this particular passage clearer that we're reading? The Ire, because it deals with Bevinyan Beit HaMikdash u'b'melechet Shabbat. Now maybe I'm mistaken and he's talking about this, but the point is that here we are in Exodus, that's talking about, it's dealing with the construction, and even says Beit HaMikdash, which normally means the temple, i.e. like Solomon's temple. Here we're talking, I think he means this, the Mishkan as well. He means the sanctuary, right? And U'melechet Shabbat, and it also is talking about work on Shabbat. B'chol zeh, however, necha lehavi misham, from the Talmud's point of view, it is preferable or it is easier for him to bring it from there, meaning the Leviticus passage. Ya'an de hagamara rotze leilef degam yom tov. Why? Because the Gemara wants to learn out that Yom Tov is also included in binyan Beit HaMikdash docher. That is to say that even on Yom Tov, the construction of the temple does not override. In other words, when Yom Tov comes, you stop the construction. Ustam Shabbat kolel gam Yom Tov. And we realize that the word Shabbat includes also Yom Tov, kemevuar b'Shavuot, as we learn out. And this was actually a big dispute, okay? As is learned out, as is explained in the tractate Shavuot, maybe not. There's no tractate Shavuot. So it has to be Shvuot, meaning oaths. Tetvav bet. On page 15.2, Ve'iyein lamala, and look above, Besof siman bo, and this I did look up, okay? And I have to try and remember yesterday when I was studying it. Okay, and look above at the end of the passage, or sof perik, or sof parsha, and look above at the end of the parsha of Bo in early Exodus, b'pasuk v'haya lacha la'ot al yadecha ma shekatuv mizeh. And look above and see what it says there. It shall be for a sign on your hand what is written there. And I'd have to go back. I believe it has to do, I have to go back and take a look, and it has to do with wearing tefillin on Shabbat. Why we don't wear tefillin on Shabbat. And essentially the reason is because the tefillin are a sign, and the Shabbat is also mentioned as a sign, and therefore you don't need to wear one sign when you're actually doing another sign. That's what it says there. But again, we, looking at everything that he says, so we can look back and see if I can find the passage he's referring to. The imkain, and if this is the case, bichlal, in the included in the word halashon et shabtotai tishmeru, you shall guard my Sabbaths, hevei gam yom tov. That includes yom tov. So let me clarify this. The point he's making is this. On the surface, it doesn't make sense to use that Leviticus passage to prove the point that you can't construct the Mishkan on the Shabbat. Because here it seems so clear. And he says, no, it's because there's the issue of Yom Tov. And here, this is speaking specifically about the Shabbat, whereas there it talks about my Sabbaths. And we know that in the term Sabbath is included Yom Tov, okay? And because he wants to learn out Yom Tov, and it says, Shabtotai, my Sabbaths, in the Leviticus passage, it appears to be clearer that it includes Yom Tov, which we couldn't learn from what we see here. So this is the point he's making. The imkain, bichlal halashon et shabtotai tishmora hevei gam yom tov. I think we read that, right? So included in the idea of the language of my Sabbaths, plural, right? You shall guard is also Yom Tov. It's included. Ma she'eno kein Shabbat, okay? However, when you use the term Shabbat, dichtiv b'parsha zo, which is written in this particular parsha, b'vadai ein kolel Yom Tov. So when it's using Shabbat in the singular like this, it's for sure talking about Shabbos. Shaharei darshinan bisamuch b'pasuk lo teva'aru eish. This is going to be important because indeed we learn out, here's the thing, that in the next passage, in the verse, you shall not kindle a flame b'chol moshvotechem, amongst in all your inhabitations, b'yom haShabbat, on the Shabbat day. Here's what you learn out: b'yom haShabbat i'ata mav'ir. On Shabbat you don't kindle a flame. Aval ata mav'ir b'yom tov. But in fact, on Yom Tov you can kindle a flame, because we know you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov.
I thought you were allowed to cook, but not kindle.
So that's a wonderful, that is actually a rabbinic interpretation, right? That when they say that what the Torah means, what the rabbis want to say the Torah means when it says mav'ir, that it means have a flame going, an open flame going on Yom Tov. And you cannot have that on Shabbat.
Right, you can transfer a flame on Yom Tov.
That's right, you can. And that still allows kindling, right?
Okay.
But you can't, on Shabbat,
Right.
instead you can use a blech. In other words, going in the opposite direction, the fact that we kindle Shabbos lights and have them burning on Shabbat was another great dispute. And there were those who said, no, when it says in here that you shall not have a flame burning on Shabbat, they meant even having a flame burning.
That's right. Even you can't cook even if you had the means to cook on Shabbat.
Correct. But you can keep things warm.
Mm-hmm.
You can have, but the point is, you can't transfer you cannot transfer fire on Shabbat. But on Yom Tov, and so the lighting the candle ahead of Shabbat, ahead of Yom Tov, and then using the candle to kindle further fire is like a rabbinic stricture.
Okay.
But so he makes his point very, very well, that the Talmud needs that other passage, because otherwise you would not be able to prove that the construction of the Mishkan was also forbidden on Yom Tov. Okay. Any questions about this before we move on? All right, let's go on to the next one.
Hold on. I got one. It's not really a question. Did they ever deal with the fact that the Kohanim do the service in the Mishkan, in the temple,
Yes.
and the Levites, and it's just them only, and
Yes.
they have that responsibility, but everybody who was making the Mishkan were not just Levites or Kohanim?
That's lovely. I don't believe I've ever come across that.
Ooh, I get to write a book.
No, Older, that's lovely. That's good. And they also, the reason why they feel it's okay for Kohanim, not Leviim now, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's the reason why. Only Kohanim could actually perform the sacrificial service. An Israelite was allowed to go up to the point of slaughtering the animal. An Israelite could do so much. And then the Kohen would catch the blood into a cup and then do what was called the blood service and everything else from that point on with the animal. And there's a very famous statement which says, Kohanim zerizim heim, which means Kohanim act with alacrity, meaning they're very careful about what they do, as opposed to the rest of us. That the Kohanim have to be, they are trained to be meticulous. But there's the word zariz also has to do with alacrity, but it includes the idea of, I love this word, which I don't think exists, meticulosity.
Well, I think it's like alacrity for them is about sort of exuberance, about rushing to do a mitzvah, but not like speeding in a way that kind of smacks of neglect, when you just kind of rush through something, but it's like rushing to do the next from mitzvah to mitzvah.
So you should know that the Kohanim had to actually physically act very deliberately, okay, which doesn't necessarily contradict what you're saying, because I think you're absolutely right in terms of what was going on emotionally, hopefully, in the Kohanim, that they were so privileged to have this particular position, right? To be able to be so close to God, although there was also danger involved. And we see how the numbers of Levites are far smaller than the numbers of Israelites when the counting takes place.
But further,
but they had to
I'm
be
just-
meticulous. So let me just finish one point. And for example, when the Kohen was walking, my understanding to perform the service, he had to walk heel to toe, heel to toe. How fast can you walk if you're walking heel to toe?
Not as fast as you could just
Correct.
without thinking that.
Correct.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that alacrity kind of implies speed,
Yes, it does.
and
You're
speed
right.
kind of implies being less meticulous.
Correct. I know. That's why I had to say everything. I
Okay.
agree. There
I'm
may
sorry I got us off the topic there, but I
No,
thought
okay.
about that and I thought, whoa, because I was
Let-
hoping they dealt with that.
You have to understand. You draw a confession from me, which is my knowledge is not encyclopedic.
Hey,
Okay.
I understand that.
Yeah.
We'll have to do some. I'll have to do some research.
But there may be something to that, though.
Yeah.
There may be something to that. All right, let's keep going.
Okay.
Eila, right? It says Eila right here. Eila hadvarim. Eila hadvarim. The word Eila. Tanya, we learn it refers to what is called a baraita. I know I've explained baraita before, but I will do it again. Baraita, the word literally means in Aramaic, outside. And what it's referring to is a source that is contemporaneous with the Mishnah, which means it was there before the year 200, which was the year in which the Mishnah was edited and created. But it's not to be found in the Mishnah. And we find sources in the Talmud very often quoted that they are referred technically as baraitot, and they are introduced with the word Tanya, as opposed to the word Tanan, which would introduce a Mishnah. There is technical language involved in studying the Gemara. And there are other baraitot that are extant. So, example, there is something called the Tosefta, which is contemporaneous with the Mishnah, but was not included. It's not the Mishnah. And it parallels the Mishnah in terms of its content and its organizational structure, but what is written in it is supplementary. Anyway, here goes. Rabbanan de Caesari Amre, that our rabbis of Caesarea would say, Siman lelametet melachot b'Shabbat min haTorah, that there is a sign of the 39 principal categories of labor that are forbidden on the Shabbat can be found in the Torah. The Torah alludes to 39 different categories of labor. Eila. So if you take apart the word Eila, Aleph Lamed He, the Aleph is the numerical value of Chad, 1. Lamed, Taltin. Lamed is worth 30. And Chet is Tamanya. Chet is 8.
8.
Okay. There's a problem, but we'll deal with it. Shelo mitma'anin rabbanan. So he goes on to say, because our rabbis do not withhold the midrash hey lechet. They don't prevent themselves from explaining the letter hey as a letter chet. And because Eila with a hey is only 36, 1, 30, and 5. But they say this hey actually represents a chet, hare lamed tet. And so that's how you get 39. And this obviously is screaming for some interpretation. Okay, so here we go. Baruch Halevi Epstein. Siman veremes ba'almahu. The whole point of this drush is only an allusion. It's not it's not a legal proof. It is just a suggestion. It's just a way of relating the fact that there are indeed 39 categories of labor with the word Eila in this position, and that if you play around with Eila a little bit and make the Hey Achet, you got 39. Okay. Aval ikar lametet melachot. But in fact, the basis, the essence of 39, deriving 39 principal categories of labor on Shabbat, which are forbidden, right? Yalfinan, we learn out mimilachot shayu b'mishkan. We learn it out from the various activities involved regarding the Mishkan, the construction of the Mishkan. So, for example, they used hides. So, processing hides, tanning is one basic category of labor. They had to use linen. To grow linen, you have to plow, you have to plant the seeds, you have to reap it, you have to, et cetera, et cetera. And they had bread they used, so you have issues such as winnowing and stuff like that. They are all, or weaving. V'nitztavu alehen, and they were commanded regarding them. But parsha zo, in this particular parsha, shelo la'asotan b'Shabbat, not to perform such labors on Shabbat, the Mishkan, when they were creating the Mishkan. K'mevu'ar b'Shabbat, that is explained in the tractate Shabbat, Mem Tet Bet, page 49b. Uvedevar hadrasha hey lachet, and regarding the interpretation of a hey as a chet, ayin mashakatuv la'el, see what is written above, Parshat Yitro, in Parsha Yitro, pasuk kabed et avicha, honor your father. Shekain rigilin chazal b'chama makomot, that our sages of blessed memory in a number of places were wont to explain this way, mipnei shehem mimotza echad, because they come from the same place in the mouth. Aha and aha. You know, there are people who have great difficulty pronouncing the two letters differently. And basically he's saying, because they're formed in the mouth in the same place. V'hevenu sham kama dugmaot lazeh, and in that particular passage, we bring a bunch of other examples. Now, let's see.
I'm not sure what he's saying about Parshat Yikro and about that example about honoring your father. What does that have to do with it turning into a hay?
Okay, so let me see if I can find that and we can actually do it, okay? So I actually, this is where one requires huge patience in studying, in being in scholarship, which is when they tell you, V-Day, whatever, look at such and such. And you have to then find a different book or turn to a different page or hunt for something. And you can't just keep going along the way we're going along, and you have to do your research. So it turned out that I actually did some of the research on this. So I'm going to stop the share here. And the first place, remember, he was referring to the passage that says, it shall be for a sign upon your hand. And I see that it is 7:59, so there's no sense in starting that today, but we will start it next time when we're there, and hopefully I will go over it one more time and make sure that I can accurately explain it to you. You notice, of course, that the work that we're doing here with the Torah Temimah is different, right, than the kind of work that Rashi is doing. And, I can't believe that it took me this long to figure out, but it was only a couple of years ago, right? A couple of years ago that I recognized that deconstruction is knowledge. That the more you can deconstruct something, the more you feel, or you can maybe claim, you know something about it. And so we look at the Rashi, which deconstructs on a primary level and gets us into some level of deconstruction. And then we look at somebody like the Torah T'mimah, who gives us examples of the rabbis' deconstructions and then goes further in terms of explicating and further deconstruction of what we're doing, and which I hope you find, and I have to assume you do, find that very satisfying, because otherwise I believe people vote with their feet. you wouldn't be back. So you either get this and realize how brilliant it is and how exciting it is and entertaining and all this kind of stuff. And so just to look at the different kind of work that's going on here. And we're just looking at 2 people. And you realize there are hundreds of people, hundreds of brilliant minds working at this stuff and how well deconstructed this material is. I'm going to stop today's recording and thank those who are watching it.